think only happy thoughts today.
This is what's interesting, because people run behind labels, and that's why I want to puke when I hear, well, he's a left centrist or the right-hand progressive. Shut up. But here's the deal. Now, here's what I want you to do. After we conclude this off the recording, I want you to give me links to what you read. Okay.
Okay.
Now, I've also found, while you were going, the story by the New Yorker about the whatever their names are, Koch brothers, and they promote themselves as libertarians and limited government, and that's supposedly what the Tea Party's doing. But it's a dressing. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm a libertarian, but you're not a libertarian.
No, not really. It's just like Hitler and the Nazis were trying to hide behind this pseudo-socialism. They never intended to enact socialism. They were in the back pocket of the most powerful industrialists and bankers in Germany, and some of the most powerful industrialists and bankers in the United States and some of the other countries in Europe. They were totally, right wing, and the whole idea is a power grab. We're going to. I'll tell you what they are. I could invent a new stupid term here. They're feudalist. They're advocates of feudalism. What they want is a world run of, by, and for corporations, a corporatocracy. If you like that. But when you get down to it, I mean, the term fascism, just Mussolini invented that, and it was all about the Roman Empire. I mean, the fasces was nothing more than a bundle of sticks with an axe head sticking in the middle of it, and it was a symbol of Roman authority. It was a symbol of the Roman Empire, and the person that had the fasces was, an emissary of the Roman government, of the Roman Empire.
But here's what is the canard, and this is what I didn't get early on, and that is I always looked at corporations as being subservient to the government. I said, they're just businesses. What the hell are they going to do? I didn't realize because
they run the government.
Well, yeah, and I'll say as it pertains to the United States, once the robber barons grabbed their power and made their alliances with their kind across the pond in Europe, especially with the Rothschilds, I mean, they went about the buying of government. And so, when we talk about corporate fascism, actually, Larry, corporations are the government. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, we're in a corporatocracy. We have been for an awful long time.
So I never had an argument with you about that, because it's like, well, whatever you want to call them, however they may seem business-oriented and out of the fray, it could not be anything further from the truth, that they are very much the fray, but they now have just rented the government to go out and show people that, that there is some kind of political process, and they allow those whores, and I am calling them whores, they are worse than any other vile piece of shit in this country. At least with prostitutes, you get what you pay for. Them, but
these guys don't put out.
No, they don't put out. Well, they do. They actually do screw you, but not in the manner you would wish. Yeah, but that's what infuriates me, because they go up there and they lie and they put all this kazinga out there, and they are nothing but little sock puppets for these guys.
Well, we've got two main parties, and they keep it that way. They don't allow a third party to come into existence, because what they've got now is just controlled opposition, between the two parties. Anybody that goes into and wants to become a candidate for either one of the major political parties has to be vetted, and neither one of these parties represents the common man. Neither one of them represents the average ordinary American. Both parties are controlled by corporations, pure and simple. I mean, that's simplistic, but it's really true. They won't allow a third party to come into existence because they don't want any they just choose. It's kind of like a revolving door, like which one of our fascist party members do we want? Do we want fascist light? We want the Democrats this time, or do we want fascist heavy, the Republicans? But it's still, you're getting fascism either way you look at it.
Exactly. But what you said is true in the sense of the reason why this Tea Party, which I was surprised didn't become its own party, but now I understand that wasn't the point. The point was to get them into the equation somehow, some way. But, I mean, for all intents and purposes, they'll be assimilated and they'll still only be two because it's easier to control.
Yeah.
Also, the reason why this isn't a grassroots movement is take a look at the characters that have been in the Libertarian Party that's been around for a much longer time.
Mm-hmm.
They can't get out there.
No.
They can't get a seat at the table necessarily.
It's a joke. I mean, they run every election. They get 50,000 votes or whatever it is in a presidential election, and I guess they go home and congratulate themselves that they're making progress.
I mean, the last third-party candidate, and of course that was manipulation too, and that was Perot.
Right.
I mean, they had Nader, whom I voted for the last time I voted in 2000. That was just, I don't know, it was just like the same old tired crap. You know, the Green Party, this party, that party. That's the last time I voted because I realized all you're voting for is garbage anyway, so don't worry about it. And in times gone by, the last one I can remember was, what's his face? Oh, man, the bespectacled guy, John, what's his name?
Oh, yeah.
Anderson.
Yeah, Anderson.
All right. Now, he said some good things, but you see, I didn't know the way the world ran back then. Now that I think of it, he did say the good things, but that doesn't get you elected.
No.
And that's why with the Tea Party, I mean, they've been around a very short time, and all of a sudden, bang, they're at the front rail. How the heck did that happen if it wasn't orchestrated? No grassroots movement can do that. That's baloney.
No.
So they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
Now,
the Koch brothers, they want to bring about a total corporate state. They aren't there yet. They're not there yet, but they want to get there, and they're moving. They're moving in that direction. I mean, it's going to be their vision of America is going to be a total fascist state. It'll be corporatism.
But isn't this exactly how things are done when they talk about Hegelian dialectics and otherwise?
Right.
Here, the New Yorker article talks about them being libertarians and anti-government, which is what the Tea Party's saying. Less government, okay, and then less government, in that vacuum, who fills it?
Right, exactly.
So my point is they come on as libertarians, and they are exactly the opposite.
Right. It's always a deception. And that's the way Satan works, and that's who's behind it all. Biz, you know that, I know that. We're trying to convince others.
No, but isn't it interesting, Larry?
Voice crying in the wilderness,
But
it's just the way it is, and it's coming down in this country. It's finally going to get down to a real fascist state. I mean, we've been moving toward that for an awful long time in this country. There's been a very large fascist element amongst the corporate leaders, the most wealthy and powerful people in this. We've talked a lot about the Bushes and the Harrimans and the Fords and the DuPonts, et cetera, et cetera. These people are all fascists and have been. We've got an oligarchy that runs this country, and it's going toward fascism. I mean, it's headed that way, and I don't see any way to stop it. But I wish to God I could, but I just don't think it's any way to stop it.
But this continuum makes perfect sense if you're willing to accept Scripture, okay? Mm-hmm. And here's the thing that is not necessarily spelled out in Scripture that we've talked about in others, and I find no fault in it. And that is when the Lord's people, when the tribes said to Jehovah, the divine law thing ain't working. Mm-hmm. We don't really, well, it is working, but we don't like it, and we don't want the judge system. So, kind of like we have kings. Yeah, okay, fine. Here's your monarchs.
Yeah.
But at that point, here's what I'm seeing, and I can't see any fault in this, and that is what rises up then, it's Satan in the breach. Mm-hmm. When there's a vacuum or when there's a rebellion, Satan fills it. Mm-hmm. And he filled it with mercantilism. Mm-hmm. Which got rid of the barter trade system and went into something else. And mercantilism, and I'm not saying nothing is good and bad other than the way it's used. But Satan used mercantilism and used the actual tangible money to create a banking system and a business system that rules the world. And that's exactly what the British East India Company was about. Mm-hmm. And you heard me say this, but the thing is, if you continue along these lines, what do you think Babylon is except a mercantile system?
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and that's why when the Lord decides, He's going to destroy it.
It's also a religious system. And what we're going to have is a one world religion. And what we've got coming in Europe is a merger one thing that people don't ever like to talk about with fascism is that fascism is not just the merger of the government and the corporations, but it's also a merger of the government, the corporations, and organized religion, and that's coming. And you see that. That's another thing. You've got this right-wing pseudo-Christianity in this country, which is mostly Protestant, quote-unquote Protestant. And, of course, in Europe, you've got the Roman Catholic Church, and you've got the rise of the Holy Roman Empire one more time. And the Fourth Reich is on its way. I mean, we've shown that, over and over again. And Germany is now starting to dominate Europe. It's going to be Germany on steroids. You're going to have a united Europe. You're not going to have individual nations anymore, except as language groups, essentially. And you've got the Roman Catholic Church moving that. And think about it. You've got Joseph Ratzinger is now the Pope. Joey Rats, as we like to call him. Now our Pope, and he is a German Nazi. The man was a member of the Wehrmacht in World War II. He was a member of the Hitler Youth. He was he fought against the Allies. He was in an anti-aircraft battery. The man was a German soldier during the Second World War, and is known to have been indoctrinated with Nazi ideals. You think this guy is, has the best interest of the people at heart? It's just
I would even give him
just amazing.
I'd even give him a pass as being a soldier, and I'll tell you why. There's a gentleman that I knew who's probably gone now, a good stone worker, and he grew up in the Sudetenland, German speaking, but in the Czech, what was now back to the Czech Republic. Well, he got conscripted by Adolf, and he was a pilot, and he wanted no part of it, but he also knew what was in second place.
I can understand that.
Yeah,
but the whole Hitler Youth thing too. You got to figure that this guy's been indoctrinated with these doctrines.
Yes, well, look, the thing that for me, what indicts him more is that he had the role as this is great, the office of the Inquisitor.
Right,
great.
Right. No, he's quite a character.
But I would even say
quite a scary character, as a matter of fact.
He looks like Satan's sitting inside a monkey suit.
He really does.
But remember, John Paul II is what, Carl Wojtyla, whatever you want to call him. Wind up in IG Farben. To me, I got more of a problem with John Paul II than Joey Ratzer.
Yeah.
However,
I got a problem with both of them.
Well, but the thing, and again, I know we're getting into this thing ecclesiastically, but do not tell me these people are infallible. That is an insult to Jesus Christ. The Vicar of Christ. Who told you that? Well, we did. We made it up. So
I got something here that I wanted to cover today. I hope we got a little time to do so, and wanted to talk about the Oklahoma City bombings and the Nazi connection there, which was significant. And I don't think people bring that out a lot. And I think the Oklahoma City bombings were kind of a forerunner of 9/11.
You going with Andrea Strassmeyer?
Yeah, I want to talk about that just a little bit. This is from the book The Beast Reawakens by Martin Lee, which is probably one of the best books I've read on the subject of the reemergence of fascism. And he says, McVeigh also read, sold, and gave away copies of the Turner Diaries, the novel that had galvanized members of the Order to undertake their looting and killing spree. Using a long-distance calling card that he got from the Spotlight, McVeigh telephoned Elohim City, a 400-acre Christian identity encampment on the Arkansas-Oklahoma border, two weeks before the Oklahoma City bombing. According to Robert Miller, head of Elohim City, McVeigh asked to speak with Andreas Strassmeyer, a former German Army lieutenant in his mid-30s who handled security duties and led paramilitary training at the white supremacist enclave. As for why he chose to live in Elohim City since 1991, where churchgoers spoke in tongues and participated in quasi-religious hate rituals, Strassmeyer would say only, "I was attracted to the alternative lifestyle." For his part, Strassmeyer has maintained that he has no recollection of receiving a phone call from McVeigh, but the German security expert admitted that he met McVeigh a year and a half earlier at a gun show in Tulsa, where they swapped weapons and addresses. That's as far as it went, according to Strassmeyer, who insisted he had no further dealings with McVeigh. Strassmeyer's version of events had been disputed by Carol Howell, a paid undercover informant for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF. Howell claims that McVeigh, using the alias Tim Tuttle, visited Strassmeyer at Elohim City on several occasions. Other guests known to have frequented Strassmeyer's home include his beer-drinking buddy, Dennis Mahon, the Oklahoma-based Klansman who lit crosses in a reunified Germany. Strassmeyer also hung out at Mahon's home in Tulsa. Mahon's connection to Strassmeyer was acknowledged by both men and corroborated by Tulsa-based ATF snitch Howell. As Howell tells it, prior to the 1995 bombing, she videotaped Strassmeyer, Mahon, and other U.S. neo-Nazis in Oklahoma talking about plans to blow up a federal building. Among the targets mentioned were the Tulsa IRS headquarters and a federal building in Oklahoma City. Howell says she passed along this tip to her ATF handlers. ATF officials have since confirmed that they received regular reports from Howell prior to the Oklahoma City attack, but apparently Howell's warning of an impending bombing were vague and muddled, hence the government took no precautionary measures. Strassmeyer's link to McVeigh and America's violent racialist underground are all the more curious given Andreas' high-powered family background in Germany. His grandfather was an early member of the Nazi Party. Years later, his father, Gunther Strassmeyer, served as Helmut Kohl's de facto chief of staff. A top Christian Democratic official in Berlin, Gunther was also a close friend and advisor to the chancellor. When the Berlin Wall opened in November 1989, they celebrated together in the streets. In 1991, Andreas Strassmeyer's American attorney, the ubiquitous Kurt Lyons, visited his client's parents at their plush residence in Berlin. How nice. Lyons assured Gunther Strassmeyer that his son was doing well in the United States. It was Lyons who helped arrange for Andreas to come to America in the first place. Lyons also introduced his young German friend to the folks at Elohim City. On April 18, 1995, the day before the Oklahoma City attack, Kirk Lyons' North Carolina law office received a 15-minute phone call from Timothy McVeigh, who again was using an alias. McVeigh had already cased the federal building in Oklahoma City. The militia movement went on high alert on the second anniversary of the Waco raid. That's when McVeigh chose to attack, according to a federal indictment, which left open the possibility of a wider conspiracy involving others unknown. ATF informant Howell has gone so far as to peg Andreas Strassmeyer as the prime instigator of the bombing. She alleges that Strassmeyer exerted an extraordinary influence over McVeigh. Strassmeyer, who has since moved back to his parents' house in Berlin, denies any involvement in the Oklahoma City massacre. Federal officials went to great lengths to downplay McVeigh's association with Strassmeyer and the web of intrigue at Elohim City. There are several possible reasons for this, including Strassmeyer's influential family connections in Germany. Another factor may be the U.S. government's reluctance to admit that it failed to pay heed to advance warning of the Oklahoma City attack from one or more undercover informants. A less sinister explanation is also possible. The prosecution in the McVeigh case did not want to complicate matters, so it ignored evidence of McVeigh's ties to U.S. and German neo-Nazi circles. Officially debriefed 2 days after the bombing, Howell also identified Strassmeyer's Elohim City roommate, Michael Brescia, as a mysterious John Doe II, who collaborated with McVeigh. Brescia claimed he had nothing to do with the Oklahoma attack. However, 5 women at a Tulsa nightclub have identified him as the person they saw sitting and drinking with Timothy McVeigh on April 8, 1995, 11 days before the blast. 2 other witnesses have told the FBI that they met Brescia in the company of McVeigh on several occasions. Brescia was subsequently indicted for his role as a member of the Aryan Republican Army, a fanatical neo-Nazi group that pulled off more bank robberies in the Midwest during the 1990s than Jesse James managed in his day. Another ARA extremist, Richard Lee Guthrie, was found hanged in a Kentucky jail on July 12, 1996, after he pled guilty to 19 holdups in 7 states. These armed assaults were carried out by ARA members wearing Count Dracula and Ronald Reagan masks. Money raised from the robberies were shared among various white power groups in the United States. Timothy McVeigh also participated in a series of Midwest bank robberies, according to his sister. it appears that McVeigh was part of the underground ARA cadre, which functioned in accordance with the leaderless resistance strategy promoted by militia tactician Louis Beam. The goal of this strategy was to engender anti-government violence while providing semi-public militia organizations with a built-in means of plausible deniability that would obscure any direct link to breakaway terrorist cells. Well, I know that's quite a bit of reading there, but I think it nails down the fact that there is a Nazi and a German, and I should say Nazi-German connection to the Oklahoma City bombings. And I think Andreas Strassmeyer was there for the specific purpose of leading a terrorist attack in this country. And it's just really interesting how his father, how his grandfather was one of the first members of the Nazi Party, and how his father was the guy who was the head of the reunification of Germany. And I think that tells us that the Third Reich never died, has morphed into the Fourth Reich, and that's what we're dealing with today.
All right. If I could, I'd like to bring us to a close.
Sure.
But if you would indulge me with two things. One will be what Gordon had written to me with regard to what you were talking about. Mm-hmm. But before that, I'd say this. I don't really have any problem with Germany because of Strassmeyer. I have no problem with Germany because supposedly Otto was there doing whatever he was doing. The fact he's in Germany, I mean, personally, I'm like, okay, he could have been anywhere. All right, what's the big deal? Now, that's my take. Are you telling me that at least in the last decade, or let's go back to, if you want to include the Murrah building bombing,
mm-hmm.
Which is what, 93, I believe, right?
95.
95, I'm sorry. Okay. You know what it was? It was the towers that were bombed in February 93.
Yeah.
So many bombings, so little time.
And they all seem to have connections to Nazism.
All right. So I would say the fact that there were some connections to Germany through Strassmeyer with OKC and with Ada and others for 9/11, to me, I'm saying it doesn't mean anything to me. Now, you give me your take as to whether Germany somehow, some way found itself more fertile ground for this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, well, I think the fact that the Third Reich never died, and the fact that even back in Konrad Adenauer's day, that they took a lot of old Nazi officials and put them back into the government. The fact that there was the flight capital program. I don't think we've gotten to that yet. Mm-hmm. Haven't really talked about it much, but that Martin Bormann. Arranged to have a huge amount of money taken out of Germany and put into other countries, and that was the money that became the seed money to rebuild Germany in the 1950s. That's a long and detailed thing, but it's just obvious to me that Nazism never died. The Third Reich never died. It's just gone underground. It's just morphed, and that one of the main things that they had always intended to do was to get back at their two main enemies, which was the United States and the Soviet Union. They were quite successful in destroying the Soviet Union. Not that in itself is a bad thing, but these were the two powers that brought them down, and they were determined to get rid of them so that they could eventually run the world. And I think they've successfully brought the Soviet Union down. And now they're working on us. And I'll have to flesh that out. I know it's very simplistic, maybe even sounds sensationalistic, but I think Andreas Strassmeyer, isn't it ridiculous to think about the idea of Kirk Lyons, who is a lawyer for these trashy elements, these low-level neo-Nazi types. He defends the Klan and the neo-Nazis, and he goes to Berlin and sits around drinking coffee or whatever with the Strassmeyer family. And Strassmeyer is like the chief of staff of Helmut Kohl's government. Doesn't that strike you as a little bit strange? And doesn't it strike you as a little bit strange that somebody from a powerful, influential family like Andrea Strassmeyer, would want to come over to the United States and hang out at Elohim City with a bunch of right-wing nuts? I mean, it just seems a little odd to me, unless you consider that he is an agent there to prepare these people to do what the Fourth Reich wants done, which is to foment terrorism in the United States.
No, I tell you what. Right now, as I look at it, there are so many bad viruses infecting our country that I mean, I stand back and I'm like, holy mackerel! Does anybody realize? I mean, this is going to explode into like an absolute goat's head stew, toxic stew, and I mean, and there'll be no recovering from this. I mean, I'm appalled by it. I'm amazed by it, and frankly, I'm afraid of it. Because this is all allowed to happen. Just as you said, whatever country is dismantled is supposed to be dismantled. And I don't believe for one second that Hitler was anything but a handler who brought Germany through all this and threw him on the rocks and then got his ass out of town.
You know, I believe there's an awful lot of evidence that Hitler didn't die in the bunker, as they said. I think there's a good case to be made for it. The Soviet Union never bought that. I say Soviet Union. Stalin never bought it. And now people say, well, Stalin was a paranoid. But, yeah, he was, but he was also a brilliant man and no fool. I mean, he was insane in one sense, had a strong sense of paranoia. But I think it's the very good. I mean, one thing that struck me as odd is they had a doppelganger. They had a guy who was dressed up as Hitler and looked very similar to him. And they thought they had found Hitler's body. And then when they started examining it more carefully, they realized this man was 2 inches taller than Hitler was and had, there were several other physical anomalies that didn't match up. And as a result, they realized that this body had been put there to throw him off the case.
Larry, whenever you get into one of these things about, well, they try to identify the body with dental records, I'm like, forget it, see you later. Adios. I mean, and then take a look at Mussolini, who I think obviously was a jerk and he didn't realize it. Yeah. I mean, that was Mussolini getting his head baseball batted down in Italy. Yeah. And that's why I had to laugh, because you mean for El Duce to be involved with Hitler. I mean, wasn't it always like apparent that he was just like a tag along, Yeah. Yeah, come over here.
He was the guy that the Vatican first set up as a fascist dictator. And was kind of their, of course, with the Vatican being in Italy, what they wanted done when they put, when they put him into office, and they were part and parcel of that movement to put him in office. What they wanted done was the Lateran Treaty, which was one of the first things he did. And the Lateran Treaty set them up as a nation state again, and it also gave them quite a bit of money, which they in turn invested in Nazi Germany, what was pre-Nazi Germany.
Yeah, and I just think that you have a case where Mussolini didn't get it. I mean, he thought he was. I mean, it's like the cleanup crews and all this stuff that we talk about, with betrayals and double crossing. Mussolini thought he was going to be solid. It's like, no, you know what? You really are. You're a second-tier jerk, and guess what? You're getting given up.
Well, where he really made a big mistake was siding with Hitler as far as bringing Italy into the Second World War. He waited for an awful long time before he got involved, and he shouldn't have gotten involved because Italy just did not have the wherewithal to pull it off. I mean, they were okay when they were fighting, in North Africa against people who only had rifles and spears, but they didn't have the war machine that it took, to fight advanced industrialized countries. And as a result, it led to his demise. Franco, on the other hand, was smarter than Mussolini, and he never did go throw in with the Axis powers in World War II, even though he was asked to several occasions.
And he was every bit the same as they were.
Yeah.
He just didn't get into it.
Yeah, he was smart enough to keep his country out of it, so that they didn't get overrun by the Allies.
Sometimes I wonder if Italy went in with Hitler just to protect the Vatican.
Yeah.
An expanded Vatican Guard.
Yeah. Well, the Vatican was always very chummy with Mussolini and really, especially the Jesuits. And that's another story for another time.
Yeah. No, but getting back to the whole situation about what you said, and I'm going to get on to Gordon's point.
Sure.
It seems to me, whether it's Stalin or whatever, there are people that are raised up to do a certain thing. Now, Stalin was Jesuit trained. And there's also information to the fact, and this may be true or not, that Khrushchev maybe did not lead, but was part of a gang.
I had no idea that Stalin was Jesuit trained. That's a new one on me.
Yep.
Is that?
Yes.
I mean, in Russia, or?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. Yes.
I didn't even know they had. Well, I guess I did know they had Jesuits there, but I was not aware of Stalin being Jesuit trained.
Oh yeah.
That is bizarre.
Early schooling. Yeah, and I don't know whether that takes place in the Ukraine or not. And I'll have to go back. And Phelps brought that up as well. I don't find any fault in it, but it's been a long time since I looked at chapter and verse. And to support that, I will do that.
Now, if I remember correctly, Stalin was from Georgia, not our Georgia, but Georgia
in
the
steppes,
Soviet Union.
Right, and that's why I'm thinking Ukraine or something like that. Yeah, I mean he wasn't from
I know that he was supposed to be a divinity student at one time, but I thought he was Orthodox. Who knows?
Put that all in parentheses. No, quotation marks. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then he became a terrorist. I mean, kind of a weird jump there. You go from studying the Bible to carrying an AK-47 or whatever.
But
I don't know.
There's a provocative story about him being assassinated by Khrushchev and the gang.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Possibly.
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I'm still thinking if FDR wasn't necessary,
I did hear one story about that. One of the observers, he was like a small-time guy in the Kremlin, but he said when Stalin started, they saw that he was choking and he was starting to die, having a heart attack and was dying. He said everybody just stood back in stunned amazement and nobody wanted to do anything.
Stunned amazement, I would have a problem with.
Yeah.
I would think it's like
he said nobody wanted to make a move because they were afraid. Oh, what if he lives?
Well, I'm thinking they're sitting there going, it's working.
Yeah, that too.
No, it was like the old commercial. It's 9:15. Terry Mans can't sleep. You remember that Vicks formula? And somebody did a commercial going, it's working. Mommy, I can't breathe. Yeah, it's all right. So, I mean, you get that whole thing about, I mean, look, this is nothing but spy versus spy versus spy.
Yeah.
It's intrigues versus intrigues. Yeah. It's double-crossing and,
the Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah, and I mean,
but
you see, here's the point, too, though. I mean, in a spiritual sense, and I don't mean to get wacky on people, but, you're dealing with the greatest liar in the world. He'll tell you, my buddy, we're going to go right through this partner, and it's the old story. You knew damn well I was a snake when you took me in.
Yeah, it's the way the mafia works. I mean, guys get up to a certain level, and then somebody wants their position and bump them off.
Well, let me just remind people, when they have played the game of Risk, just how Machiavellian or Borgian they have gotten. I don't know how many deals I made with somebody when shut. And then went ahead and said, sorry to tell you this, but you're out. So, I mean, I'm making fun of it, but it is definitely there in the human spirit. And it is a case of ambushing and double-crossing and selling something. I mean, it is just a perfect history of subterfuge and basically lying. Mm-hmm. Now, to tie this all up, first of all, I do want to bring in what Gordon had asked. In the world that we're facing, if we're going to get into another showdown, and maybe I'll talk about this at another time, although I have brought it up, I think there are futuristic works that are inspired, not from the good side, that kind of depict what's going to take place. It would seem to me that Europe, and let's think about this. We've laughed at monarchs. We felt their countries are like backwards, and, like we said, they take 8-hour lunches, they drink wine, they eat chocolate, and they don't do anything. But you know what? They're still standing. And it's not all so much of a throw from that famous soliloquy by the brothel owner, in Catch-22. He goes,
oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we've been taken over by everybody. We'll still be standing. But that's a different story.
Yeah.
And I think we're heading down that road. Now, Gordon said, does Larry really believe that Germany would raise up an army and get into it as militarily as they had in World War II and won? I'll let you address that.
Well, it won't be Germany as such, but yes, there is a move afoot, a very strong movement afoot within the European Union to produce a powerful army. And it's in the works. It's going on right now. When you consider that at least 2 of the European Union nations or at least right now, England is still part of the European Union. You've got England and France are both armed with nuclear weapons. Well, everybody knows that Germany itself was doing, well, not everybody knows, but a lot of people know that Germany itself was doing research on nuclear weapons in South Africa, and that they could produce, they already know how to produce nukes, and could produce them if they wanted to, if the time came that they wanted to do that. What's going to happen is the European Union will become there will be no more sovereign nations. There will be no more France, no more Britain, no more, Poland, whatever. There will be, these will only be language groups. What you're going to have is basically a two-tier system of the main countries, such as Britain and France, and then you'll have countries like Spain and Italy and probably others, Greece, of course. These countries which are not economically advanced, they kind of become the vassal states. But what you'll have is a united Europe, and it will have its own army, its own military, which will, I think, eventually be involved in conflict. And I think that's all brewing in the Middle East. I'm not sure how it's going to come about. I tend to think that the United States will get itself crushed first in what will be the first phase of a World War III, and then there may be a second phase to a World War III, and then eventually the Battle of Armageddon. And at the Battle of Armageddon is, when the Antichrist is confronted by Jesus Christ himself.
All right.
And I think what's going to happen, and one of the reasons why the European Union and the papacy want to go down into the Middle East is because the papacy wants Jerusalem. And that is a very important thing, and it has been. That's what the first Crusades were all about. There were several Crusades. I think there were 3 major Crusades, but they were all about taking Jerusalem. There's a reason for that. And in the Bible, it tells us that the Antichrist will go into the temple, and that is where he will proclaim himself to be God to the world. And I think through satellite communications, you will see that happen if you're here. And I know all this, again, it's very simplistic. I'd have to flesh it out and make it more plain, but yes, I do believe. In fact, I know they're creating a Euro army now. It's coming about, and Germany will lead it because Germany is becoming the Fourth Reich. They're going to lead the new Holy Roman Empire.
All right. Are you familiar with Sherbrigg?
No.
All right. I got to bring this up to you because I was aware of it maybe, I guess, somewhere around 2004 or 5. Mm-hmm. And the reason I bring this up is because this may be exactly what you think is going to rise up. One of the things I think, no matter what, is that the United States is cut out of this deal. Mm. And I'm not so sure that the UK isn't involved at all. Now, this also is to the exclusion of what NATO is going to do. Mm. And I think NATO also will, there
won't be a NATO because there won't be any U.S.,
well, that's what I mean. There'll be no such thing as U.S. in the NATO. I think, I'm thinking of a word.
It'll be a European Union with its own defense, its own military.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if I was going to say the word divest, that NATO will divest itself of the U.S., which is pretty heavy words.
I think there's got to be a major conflict in which the United States is taking the lead in the Middle East, and the United States will come in conflict probably with Russia and maybe with China. And at any rate, the United States will get its butt kicked so badly that we will become a second-rate, third-rate power. We will have to slink back to our own borders, and we will become sort of a vassal state of the European Union. I think that, the whole idea in the one world government is to have a series of unions, with the European Union being the main, that's where the seat of government will be. And I think that, the United States will become part of a tripartite system with being North American Union with Canada, Mexico, and then maybe some of the countries of Central America. I'm not sure. But anyway, I think we'll just be an economic zone, sort of like, basically we'll be a vassal state of the Holy Roman Empire.
Well, everything will be a vassal state of the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, now let me hit this real quick, and we can pick up on this if you want to. Sherbrig, there is a website, sherbrig.dk. That's spelled SHIRBRIG.
Mm-hmm.
It is an anagram. I haven't looked at it until you just reminded me now, because this could be what NATO was. And it was born out of Denmark, which I think is interesting. And yet I have to tell you, at one time, I heard one of the crown heads of Denmark giving a speech, and I swear to God, he was speaking in his native tongue.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there, and with the language and with the vehemence with which he spoke, I'm like, God, this guy sounds like Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, well, poor Denmark. Well, poor Denmark actually is a pimple on Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not so sure that there really is much of a difference anymore between some of the fascist intents of what was usually assigned to Germany that also has spread into Scandinavia, which I'm sorry to say, but I think that's one of the reasons why you saw this latest shooter. I don't think that Scandinavia is as groovy and as pacifist as everyone thinks it is.
Oh, no, not at the top. Not really. I mean, when you get down to it, Sweden had a very large Nazi party that collaborated.
Wait, let me ask you something. You talking in your shoe right now?
I'm sorry. Had the phone at a weird angle.
Don't even tell me about that. I don't want to know.
No, I've shifted it over while I was looking at some papers here. I was trying to come up with something that was relevant, but anyway, I didn't.
Well, at least that was funny.
Okay, at any rate, yeah, is a very large Nazi-style right wing in Sweden, and during World War II, of course, Sweden was neutral, but they collaborated with the Nazis. They were essentially a fascist state, or kind of a vassal state of Germany. I think I'm using vassal state too much, but
probably.
Yeah, they definitely were. They have a very powerful. There is a series of movies that were made from some political / crime novels. Can't remember the guy's name. It's not coming to me right now. But this was all based on this network of Nazi-style powerful people within the Swedish oligarchy, and the first one was called "The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo," and it's basically a story of a young woman who has been the victim of these people, and they have like this weird pedophile ring, and it's all kinds of. It's just really, really strange stuff, really spooky, and this is based on actual fact. It seems that along with Nazism and the extreme right, we also get the occult, satanic, ritual abuse of children, and that's kind of where it starts off. And it's called the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and it's been made into a movie. It's a very good movie. It's got subtitles. It's in Swedish, but I've seen it, and it has like two sequels to it too, and I don't remember the names of those. But it's all about how the Swedish aristocracy, elite, whatever, has a very large pro-Nazi element within it.
All right, let me just hit you, and I'll leave you with this and everyone else.
Okay.
Because this is interesting, and this might be the answer. Sherbrig is an anagram of sorts for Standby Forces High Readiness Brigade. Just hang with me.
Sounds kind of ominous, doesn't it?
Well, the fact that it's still going and that very few know about it, and there are 16 nations involved in it. And let me just, okay, I got it here. Hold on. In 1995, a statement from the UN, Supplement to an Agenda for Peace, recommended that the UN should consider the idea of a rapid deployment force consisting of units from a number of member states trained to the same standard, using the same operating procedures and interoperable equipment, and taking part in combined exercise at regular intervals. All right, blah, blah, blah. It says in December 1996, Austria, Canada, Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, and Sweden signed a letter of intent of cooperating on the establishment of a framework for SHRBRIG. Now, as of November 2007, 16 nations, Argentina, Austria, Canada, Denmark, Finland, Italy, Ireland, Lithuania, the Netherlands, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovenia, Spain, and Sweden, have signed on one or more SHRBRIG documents, while 7 more nations, Chile, Croatia, Czech Republic, Egypt, Jordan, Latvia, and Senegal, are participating as observers. The new situation was approved by the nations at the 31st Steering Committee held in Rome on November 14th and 15th, where the Hungarian termination of the observer status in SHRBRIG was discussed and agreed. So I guess they said, I'm out of here. But here's what's interesting. No mention of the UK, no mention of the US, and interestingly, Canada is involved in this. Now, here's another thing.
Yeah, I just can't believe that about the Canadians being involved in something like that.
Well, you know what it is? I mean, I think they're trying to bring hockey to third world.
That may be it. That may be it.
But here's something interesting as well, and this is something that I think Charles was sending me, and I think Robert Burke might have, and Robert Burke is out there somewhere, but he chose to withdraw from all this, having gone through a real health issue. Robert Burke, if you remember him, Larry, was a straight shooter, somebody who did call in and will be heard actually in the marathon. But, I mean, he was a very astute observer. He's the one that blew the whistle on Chapman, and he was absolutely right.
Yeah, I remember. I came in a little bit later than Robert Burke, but I remember the thing about Chapman, and I think isn't Chapman still associated with Alex Jones?
Yes, and the ironic part is that when he was on with me, he used to run Jones down all the time.
Oh yeah.
And that's and I've been through that. But yes, Chapman is.
And basically, the guy is a con man. He's a fraud.
No, and all Burke did, and Burke dealt with him. That was the whole thing. Burke dealt with him, and saw something strange going on, and he told me this through a series of weeks. And not that I didn't believe him, but he's going, look, I'm telling you, there's something wrong here. He's pumping and dumping.
Yeah.
And then he found out that he's got all kinds of indictments on him going back to the 80s in the United States. He doesn't come back here because he doesn't like the place. He doesn't come back here because they'll arrest his ass. And he got involved in a Securities and Exchange, an SEC indictment with somebody else, and that happened recently. But Burke had no horse in this race other than that he dealt with Chapman, and he saw when things were not going right, and he kept feeding me this stuff because I had Chapman on almost weekly.
Right.
And sure enough, he was right. And and I dumped him, and a lot of people did. But when he sounded the warning to others, like Cedarstrom from Colorado, they got all pissed off. Forget the fact that he was right. They didn't like to see him go down because they were all in the league.
Right.
So anyway, Burke was onto this stuff, and here's what they told me too, and at least Wilcox I think was advanced this the most, and that Canada was hedging its bets more or less by not necessarily excising itself from a North American Union. They were like okay with that, but they were also kind of currying favor with the European Union as if they were going to hedge their bets and be in both.
Oh, I see.
So okay. Canada, and we're talking about the government now, and that's clear. I mean, we have our fun. I mean, governments suck. Right. But Canada is also now involved in this SHRBRIG thing, which looks like it should be a European thing, but as you just heard me recite, I mean, it looks like it's going to be...
They've even got African nations in there.
What does Senegal got to do with this? I know, yeah. In Senegal. So what is going on with this And this is another little quiet thing going on. Rapid deployment, okay, great. So everybody can go to that, and I'll post this link as well, and you can decide for yourself.
Yeah.
But this is something else that's going on, and if you've not known about this and you get a chance to take a look at it, Larry, you might start to realize that this might be exactly what you're thinking about. While NATO is the puppet show going on in front of everyone, this other thing is taking on another life.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a Holy Roman Empire, the last of the resurrections of the Roman Empire, and the Vatican is hot and heavy going to take Jerusalem, and that's going to happen. And the emperor will be at that time will be the Antichrist, and he's going to proclaim himself to be God in the temple, and this will be what the Bible calls the abomination of desolation. It's like a pivotal event during the tribulation.
Yeah,
and that will be the point when everything heats up to finally the Battle of Armageddon. And I mean, all the major powers in the world, all the major military powers in the world, are building up. I mean, it's just like people must have sat around just prior to World War II back in the 1930s. I know there were quite a few intellectuals and people that kept up with current events and were very concerned, you know, and especially a lot of young intellectuals, and they would write about it, they would talk about it, they would even, you know, but there really didn't seem to be much that they could do. In particular, George Seldes and the other American correspondents during the time of the Spanish Civil War were trying to tell the American public that this was a dress rehearsal for a Second World War, and they couldn't get their message through because the Roman Catholic Church had too many people, had too much power in this country, especially on the New York Times. Seldes goes into that. I'd like to talk about that sometime in the future. We talk about censorship and how that the Roman Catholic powers kept that news from getting to the American public.
Okay. By the way, when you go to the Sherbrooke website, you got to look at one of their missions, because I mean, I didn't even know this thing happened.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through it right now, but it's like this stuff is going on. We have no idea. I will say this. You'll appreciate hearing this, although I still think it's not making sense to me. Seldes apparently chirped in on what I would call the alleged coup of Wall Street versus FDR. And I'm going to
didn't know that.
Neither did I. And I mean, we respect him. Still, something's not making sense to me in this whole thing. Mm-hmm. But Seldes also had opined on this, and I'll send you the links to see so you can see what he wrote about it.
Yeah.
Again, very interesting. That's a murky time, no doubt about it. But these are the things that go on that are rarely remembered and certainly not recorded in history. No big deal anymore. But the listeners,
you know, one thing he wrote about that was extremely interesting to me was he talked to Hindenburg right at the end of the First World War, just as it was ending, and right, I guess maybe within the week after the armistice. He went to Germany and talked to Hindenburg, and Hindenburg told him that, yes, we lost the war on the battlefield because the United States had come in with fresh troops, and there was just really nowhere to go after that. We couldn't fight them off. We knew we were going to lose. Of course, if that had ever become public, it was censored. It was not. I don't. At first I couldn't understand why it was censored. Then it dawned on me. Well, the reason it was censored was, if the public had known, the general public in Europe and the United States had known that was the reason, then there would have been no way for the Nazis to have used the stab in the back theory. That's what Hitler and Ludendorff were using was, yes, we were stabbed in the back by the Jews and the socialists and the communists, and that's not what happened at all. They lost on the battlefield because they had taken on too many countries, and it was destined for them to use that ploy to the people, to make the people believe that Germany had been stabbed in the back when in fact it had just lost, due to physical causes.
Well, again, I think that was an orchestrated war. I think that Germany obviously was becoming a power. But, I mean, all the heads of state know what's going on. I'm just wondering if that war was a war to punish Germany. And I'm sorry, but all the roads do lead to Rome. And I think that's a statement that should not be discounted whatsoever.
There's something I need to add here to clear something up. I had forgotten that the Kaisers were Hohenzollerns. In other words, the royal family of Prussia. They were not Habsburgs. However, the Habsburgs come into play because the Habsburgs were the ruling house of Austria, and
right.
Austria-Hungary and Germany were in league together during the First World War.
They were Romans.
And that's where the influence of the Habsburgs were basically the protectors of the Roman Catholic Church, and that's why there was a strong bond there between the Second Reich and the Vatican.
Well, and also when Bismarck came on the scene, he was not a Catholic.
No, he wasn't. In fact, what happened was, though, that due to the left wing, the machinations of the left wing in Germany, the Roman Catholic Church became an ally with the Junkers, or the Hohenzollerns. So, in other words, about midway through the Second Reich, it sort of it went from being Protestant and being somewhat anti-Catholic to being tolerant of Catholicism and more favorable toward the Vatican because they helped them out in their struggle against the left.
All right, putting it simply, I think what happened was World War I was to smack Germany around and get it back in line. Once it got back in line, that Rome obviously had a stooge in Hitler, and Hitler knew exactly what he was leading his country into and how it would end up.
Well, I think it's pretty much the scenario is what was the Pike-Mazzini letter, which I really believe to be fake, but I think that the scenario laid out there by whoever wrote it and whenever it was written, it was a series of 3 world wars to bring about world government, and that's the way it's gone down, and we're just on the tip of experiencing the Third World War. And I think the Third World War may come in several stages. It may be a lot longer. When you get down to it, the Second World War started in 1931. It didn't start in 1939. It started in 1931 when the Japanese attacked Manchuria. And that was the beginning of the Japanese Empire, pushing out of its boundaries within Japan and conquering territory in Manchuria and then on in China. So you had a period of really 14 years that the Second World War lasted. I think the first shots fired in the Third World War were in New York City on 9/11. I think that was the beginning of the Third World War, just the opening stages of it. And I think it's going to take quite a while to unfold, but I think when Afghanistan and Iraq were brought under attack by the United States, that was just ramping it up.
No, I mean
that's just my opinion.
It would be very hard to sell the peoples of the world on what's coming down the pike unless it wasn't looked at as being very much needed. I mean, it's like what we said. My take is you're not going to get martial law in the United States unless you ask for it. They're not going to come rolling in one day. You're going to plead for it. And that's what I think goes back to that Satanist, what's his face? Henry Kissinger, making his crack about how the United States, people would be like upset. You know that quote.
Yeah.
They would be upset if foreign troops came into the country, but there'll come a time when they'll beg for them. Don't forget that. I think that's a very viable scenario. So, I mean, with all that's going to transpire, yes, I think it's very orchestrated. It's going to take a while to happen. And the seeds of it have already been planted, as you said.
Yeah, I think we're just in the opening stages of it. And I think I think there's going to be I know there's going to be a third world war. I'm just convinced of that. But I think it may take place in
right.
The major part of the war would take place in 2 stages in the Middle East. And I think in that first stage, the United States has to get bumped off as a power. And I think that will be the first stage. And then the second stage will bring in the European Union, which I now call the Holy Roman Empire.
But there has to be something that's going to allow the people to go for such a rule.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I was going. You got, everybody knows the story. World War I, League of Nations, didn't work. World War II, United Nations, everybody laughs at it. You shouldn't, because it's
pretty nasty.
It's on steroids, and it's got everything ready, I guess you could say administratively, for this brave new world to come. So what are we looking for? We're looking for a third world war where something can promise peace at all costs, and everybody's going to be like, wow, man, we really need that. So what would make people want to feel that way? A third world war.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, of course, they're going to get peace, but it's the old story, not through harmony, but by totalitarianism and the complete lack of acceptance and allowance of dissent.
Right.
Forget about that, man. That's done.
Yeah.
So you're right. And, of course, religion will be a big player in this as the reasons, as they'll record in history books about why there was a war. Well, there was these Christians and Jews and Muslims, and they couldn't get along. So we're all going to – yeah, right. And let's face it, it's true, though, Larry. I mean, whether it's a corporation, whether it's the state, as even Tom had written, I didn't read that part of the email to you, but you can take a look at the National Football League and call that a god.